Hi, morning everybody, and thanks for being with us today. We're here this morning to look at international A-level modern foreign languages, and the focus of the session this morning is conducting the speaking exam. I'll just pick up on a couple of things that our host Hansel said. So just to say, I'll answer questions at the end. I'll allow some time for that. So forgive me if I'm not monitoring the chat function all the way through because I'm presenting on my own this morning. So I'm kind of going to get on with what I need to say, and then we'll pick up on questions at the end if that's okay. So if you do ask a question and the answer doesn't appear, it's not that I'm ignoring you. We'll get there. The second thing just to say is that we've put a WeTransfer link in the chat right at the beginning of the chat. And Hansel, our host, will drop that in again at several points during the course of the morning. But that has some audio recordings in that we'd like you to have access to during the training this morning. So if in the meantime you're able to click on that WeTransfer link and download those recordings, that would be great. Any problems with that, our host Hansel will help you via the chat. So he's going to monitor that. Anyway, that's enough technical information. Let's get started then. So we're going to just sort of give you the little welcome talk. First of all, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the training, and then we're going to get on and we're going to look at each part of the test, how you run it, how you organize it. And as I say, if time permits, we'll allow you a little bit of time to listen to some tests in French, Spanish, and German, and you will see in that link those tests should be there. Those audio recordings should be there. Those are also available through the Pearson website for your particular language. So if you're not able to get them from the link today, you can find them there as well after the event. But it's kind of quite nice to do it in the course of the morning while you're here and focused on what you're doing. So the training today, we're going to look at how you make the necessary arrangements for the speaking tests, how you run the two different tests, the AS and the A-level test, how each test is marked, although the focus of the training today is not on actual marking, but it's important for you to understand really what the mark schemes are asking for, just to train your students to be able to do the things that get them the marks. And then we always like to do a little bit of sort of pedagogy type activity. So we've got a few simple activities that you might like to try in class just to help your students develop the skills that are necessary for each part of the test. So I'm going to just tell you a little bit of a sort of message from our sponsor kind of thing at this point. So we're just going to do a little welcome to Pearson and just introduce ourselves as well. So if you're new to Pearson, we are probably the world's leading company, one of the world's leading companies, and also it's the largest UK awarding organisation, and it's a business with a heritage of over 150 years. We partner with schools worldwide. And we have over 3.5 million students sort of work with us each year. In terms of numbers, if you like a few numbers, 6,500, that's the number of schools and employers that we partner with. 10 million exam scripts marked on behalf of the UK Department for Education each year, and we operate in 70 countries, and some of you, I guess, will be in some of those countries this morning. So I'm going to begin really by talking to you. We're going to sort of talk you through the sort of technical requirements, the organizational things to do with the tests, and then we'll get into conducting the tests yourselves. So just a few things really to talk about. You need to be doing these things well in advance of the test. In terms of the rooms, you need to make sure that you're booking a quiet, secure room to conduct the test in. And it's also in those circumstances a good idea to make sure that you've spoken to site staff so that there's no machinery working by. You know, examiners can only mark what they can hear. And if there's a lawnmower outside or some machinery making a noise in another room, then that can affect the quality of the recording. So we, quiet and secure in terms of the room. For the timetable, you need to put together a timetable and share that with your students. Do please make sure that you allow breaks for yourself, and also kind of just remembering that corridors and so on can be noisy during lessons, bells and that sort of thing. So try to sort of work around those things as well. If you have a fairly large number of candidates, do make sure that you schedule in proper breaks and so on for yourself as well. Because we do depend very much on the teachers who conduct the test to conduct the test in the right kind of way, so that we facilitate the performance of the candidates. And for you, that takes concentration, and it's not a difficult thing to do, but to concentrate and to get all of the details right on behalf of your candidates is really important. And so do just make sure that you set a pace where it's kind of okay to do, and that you haven't exhausted yourself, because we want the same experience for the candidate at the beginning of the morning as at the end of the afternoon. In terms of recording equipment, you need to make sure that you have a digital recorder that records in a format that Learner Work Transfer or Learner Work Assessment, which is the Pearson platform, will accept. MP3 is best, and we would really recommend that you have a handheld recording device rather than try to do it on a laptop, because sometimes a laptop will record, but the recording quality is not as good. And keep in mind that will need to be transferred, and it will need to be clearly audible to the examiner who's going to mark it. So the best practice really is to have one of those handheld devices, and also just to check that that's a handheld device that records in an MP3 format, because they don't all. And that MP3 format is the kind of universal format. And also have some sort of backup and some spare batteries just in case. I'd also recommend you have a stop clock in the room, because the science department or PE or somebody can quite often lend you those things, and it's very easy to think if you're looking at a recording device that it has the time on it, but you have enough to do during the conduct of this test without trying to do mental arithmetic to subtract 2 minutes from 8 minutes and 50 seconds and that sort of thing. So the stop clock is a good feature. And there are parts of the test as well which are time critical, and so there are parts of the test where after a certain point examiners will stop listening and examiners will time it. So do just make sure you keep on top of the timings, and we'll look at that as we go through the test the test presentation this morning. Now, there's some materials that will come from Pearson as well, so you need to make sure that you've collected any necessary documentation, that you have all of those things from your exams officer, that you've used those things to plan your route through the test for the students. And please just make sure that you have checked with your exams officer that any documentation, any materials that you need are in school, and that those should be at least 3 days before the exam window, and you're able to look at materials 3 days before the exam window, 3 working days, and that's not necessarily 3 days before your students do the exam. It's 3 days before any student anywhere does the exam. The exam windows will appear in a moment on the next slide, and we'll tell you when those are for the 25-26 series. And then after the test, you need to upload. So you need to just make sure that all of the tests are labeled with the correct file name and upload them to Learner Work Transfer, Learner Work Assessment. I'm never quite sure which is the correct LWA, LWT, but that's the Pearson platform. Your exams officer will be able to point you in the direction of that, and they may take on that responsibility for you. And please also make sure that you save a copy of the recordings, just in case of any recordings being corrupted in transfer. So if you've done them on a handheld recording device, please save them onto a school server somewhere. It's a good idea to save them, check that they're saved, and also then wipe them from the handheld device, because those are the the candidates confidential exam material, just like it would be if it were a paper exam sat in the hall or the gym or wherever they sit their exams in your centre. Okay, so those things really to get ready in advance. If we look at the dates as well, now the dates of the tests, you choose the date, and that needs to be in the period specified by Pearson Edexcel. And you can find some further information on the website for the qualification. Your exams officer can also find it. The exam window will be similar, but will kind of change every year. So for the 2025-2026 exams, so the January exam series, and we're talking about speaking exams here, so it kind of comes before the main exams, will be from the 5th of November through to the 14th of December 2025 inclusive, so you can do on the 5th and on the 14th. And for the summer, the May-June exam series, it's from the 16th of April through to the 21st of May, and again inclusive. So anywhere within that those exam windows, you're able to have to schedule your exams. And remember what I said about I think 3 working days before the actual exam window. So technically on the 13th of April, there, I don't know what day of the week it is, whether that would be a working day or not, you could have access to materials. Okay. Now we're looking at 2 units for the International A-level. So we're looking at an AS task and we're looking at an A2 task. And I'm just going to sort of talk you through the overview of the Unit 1 task test and the Unit 3 test now. So for the Unit 1 test, candidates have preparation time of 15 minutes. So they need to prepare the speaking card for discussion, and they can make notes during that time. So they have 15 minutes to prepare, and that preparation will need to be properly supervised in a separate room. And then Section A requires the students to respond to 4 Pearson set questions on a stimulus related to one of the students' 2 chosen general topic areas, and that's 4 minutes of test time. And Section B requires the teacher examiner to engage the student in a discussion that, although still linked to the same general topic area and its linked topics, moves away from the main focus of the stimulus. So just to be clear, we'll look at all of this a little bit in more detail as we move through the presentation. They have the card. There are 4 set questions there, and each of those is about a minute. And the student has chosen one of the general topic areas. So they choose 2, and they're randomly allocated. And then you develop the discussion, but on the same general topic area, but moving away from the main focus of the stimulus card. So that Unit 1 test lasts up to about 9 to 10 minutes typically. So about 4 minutes on the stimulus card, and 4 to 6 minutes on the discussion that follows. Now for the Unit 3 test, if we just sort of look at the overview of the Unit 3 test, remember that the Unit 1 test was the general topic areas. We'll have a look at all of that in a moment, but the Unit 3 test is really now something that kind of steps up a level, because we're looking at kind of the A2 qualification. So for this task, Section A is a presentation and debate, and this requires the students to demonstrate the effectiveness of their target language skills by presenting and taking a clear stance on any issue of their choice for about 1 minute. And students will then interact with the teacher examiner and defend and justify their views for up to 4 minutes. So just to be clear, they give a presentation, it's about a minute. And it's optional, but it's a good time to mention the sources of the reading as well, because this debate has to be informed by information. So they do a minute's presentation where they adopt their stance and they mention their sources of reading. It's good practice for them to do that. And then there's a debate for 4 minutes where you interrogate, if you like, their stance on their topic. And section B is a discussion, and the teacher examiner initiates a spontaneous discussion on at least 2 further issues, moving the conversation away from the student's chosen issue. So in both the Unit 1 and the Unit 3 test, we start with something that the student has had some opportunity to prepare. So in Unit 1, the card, and in Unit 3, the presentation and debate, their chosen topic that they've researched, and then we move it away. And so that's a 6 to 8 minute test time there. So just as well to note with Unit 3, students will be expected to use debating skills and argument to discuss their chosen issue. And they're going to be assessed on their reading and research skills in their chosen issue, as well as their communication skills and the quality of their spoken language. So it's very important that they reference the things that they have read. Okay, and so in that debate, if you say, yes, but surely something, say, well, no, because such and such an author says this, or in an article I read, it is clear that, okay, and they need to defend their stance with evidence from the things that they've read. Okay. So the overview. Now, let's just have a look at sort of what happens on the day. Okay, so this is kind of taking you through the day before on the day before the test begins, and then through the parts of the test. So each student is tested separately in a one-to-one session with their teacher. The exam room as well needs to have the correct notices displayed and be free from any display that could aid a student. So just the same sort of thing as if they were doing an exam in the hall or the gym. We have those exam notices, notice to candidates, notice student, notice about mobile phones, etc. All of those things need to be in the room, and make sure you've covered any display that could help them. Students are not allowed to have access to dictionaries and phones or any other aids during the test. Okay, so that's before. Now, on the day before the test begins as well, the teacher starts the recording device. Here we go, we're starting the recording device now, and announces the name of the centre, the number of the candidate, the name of the candidate, and then you move directly on to the conduct of the test. And each candidate must be recorded separately. So you don't use pause at all on the recording device. And it's really important that each candidate is recorded, and that's a separate file that is uploaded to transfer learner work assessment with Pearson. So we don't do it as a continuous thing and pause them. Again, very important. And if the examiner finds, for example, that you have done that, that could be sent back to the centre, and you would be asked to sort that out. So it's worth making sure you get that right from the beginning. It's just like in the written exams, they each have their own paper exam booklet that they write in. Now, the whole test also needs to be recorded. So that's the candidate identification, you know, where you give the name and centre number, etc. The tasks, of course, themselves, and also the wrap up that says, thank you very much. That is the end of the test. Okay, important to say that is the end of the test, and that makes it clear to the examiner who's marking it that at that point they can stop marking. And then we also know that there isn't anything missed off the end. Sometimes tests that just end in the middle of nowhere because maybe the teacher has pressed stop and then wrapped up the test. There is a sort of question mark about whether the test actually ended or whether it was that the recording device didn't work. So again, just that communication with the examiner is really important. The recording device, as I said, mustn't be paused during the test. The whole test needs to be conducted in the target language. So that again is important. And please just make sure that your students are familiar with all of the target language that they need to know that what it is you're telling them. There will be a point where you say, now we're going to move on to, and we're going to talk about something, and just make sure that, you know, for example, those general topic areas and that sort of thing, that they know those things in the target language, and that you use a sort of consistent set of linguistic formulae to tell them what's going to happen next. And then at the end of each part of the test, you need to, as I say, you introduce what happens next in the target language. And as I say, at the end of the test, you need to announce end of test and stop the recording device. Now, a couple of sort of things. Obviously, some of our students will have some special needs that are related to general kind of exam arrangements, but also remember that these are speaking tests, and so there could be specific special needs which are, you know, not part of what we've catered for in their kind of extra time or whatever for written exams, but that may be something specific to speaking. So the aim really is to minimize the barriers faced by students with special needs or disabilities. So we don't make extra, we don't allow extra marks or anything like that. The performance needs to be demonstrated in the same way as any other students. But obviously, if there are some barriers, we can make arrangements that will remove some of those barriers. Now, please then speak to your exams officer and also ask them to contact Pearson for guidance if there's any kind of query. If you're going to make some sort of special arrangement for students with a special educational need, do make sure you do that in good time, so that, you know, any practices that you're doing in class and so on, they can have a practice with that arrangement. So it isn't just the first time they've dealt with that arrangement in the exam itself. So, you know, a student with dyslexia might be able to have some extra time for doing, you know, preparation of anything where they need to read. A student with verbal processing difficulty might have some extra time to speak, you see, and that's the sort of thing where maybe they wouldn't necessarily have extra time for a written exam, but they may have it for a speaking exam. And of course, a partially sighted student might have access to a text or a spoken text or a reader, etc. So just sort of remember that speaking exams are slightly different from written exams. So if those things need to be arranged, you make sure you get them arranged and ready to go. I mentioned as well the fact that the test needs to be conducted entirely in the target language. So the language for transitions and recovery, you know, need to kind of reflect that. Please use this consistent and familiar set of phrases to transition from one part of the test to the next. You can devise them yourself, you know, but you just need to make sure your students understand. So it's, you know, the good morning, good afternoon. We begin with the picture-based, you know, whatever it is you're going to say, thank you, that is the end of the test. So just make sure that they are aware of those things. If you need to if you make a mistake as well, or you need to self-correct, because it isn't always them, you know, that gets confused. Sometimes you can be confused yourself about what it is you need to do next. Again, keep talking in the target language, but just be mindful that their level of fluency and comprehension won't be the same as yours. And so it's important just to make sure that you say something that they're understanding that brings them back onto course. You know, there's nothing worse than not understanding what's being said to you in an exam situation. Make sure as well that your students know the exact words in the target language for the topics. I think I mentioned that already. And also just make sure that your students have recovery skills to ask you to repeat a question, so you can repeat up to twice, or to clarify a question if appropriate. Always really, we're looking for you, and this is a sort of overarching message really, as the teacher examiner, we're looking for facilitative examining. And so what we need you to be doing is to be keeping the language you use to ask the questions as simple and accessible as possible. And also, I would suggest to you, as far as you possibly can, where the option exists, using the form and structure of French, Spanish, and German that is quite close to their native language structure, so that we don't go down the route of heavily idiomatic language that they may find harder to understand. Because really the complexity needs to come from them, you know, the sophistication comes from them. So you can keep your questioning nice and simple, and that's a really sort of important thing to do. So, you know, questions like, do you agree that inadequate infrastructure is a challenge for rail freight? You see how complex that is, you know, but a better question, do you think industry needs better trains? And I think, you know, if you think along those lines, that's a really important thing to be doing. And that's particularly true in the debate, because you will have a level of language which is going to be a long way beyond what your candidates are going to be able to do. So you need to make sure that you give them the opportunity to showcase their language, and you keep yours as simple as you possibly can. And it's also a good idea to just think about, as you're doing questions in the sort of general topic discussions and in the follow-up parts of the debate, but also in the follow-up parts of the debate for Unit 3, try to vary your interrogatives and your linguistic structures. So we're looking, you know, why, when, how, where, who, what, and also that we're getting past, present, and future. So those different interrogatives and those different time frames will give students access to different marks, but they will also elicit different kinds of responses. And so it's good practice to kind of get that consistent variation going through the examining. Okay, so just to say, simple questions as far as you can, vary your interrogatives, and make sure that we give them the opportunity to use those different time frames. Also, just to say, in terms of facilitative examining, you know, the sort of overarching idea really is that you begin with open questions as far as you can in both the debate and the general topic discussion in Unit 1. Those are questions, tell me about, okay, what, speak to me about, tell me about, okay, explain a bit about. Those questions which are open questions and give students an opportunity to tell you what they do know. But what's important here is that you try not to bring any assumptions to the table here, that you don't bring your own knowledge to the exam as well. Because, you know, in the debate, for example, you might be a real expert on their topic, but actually we still need to test out their understanding rather than yours. And so don't bring your own knowledge to it as far as we possibly can. And particularly in the line of questions, avoid anything that may trip them up with a detail, with facts and so on that they may not know, because both with the general topic discussion in Unit 1, but also in particular with the debate in Unit 3, you won't really know what it is they know. You won't really know what it is they've researched. And even if you know something about what they know and they think they know and what they think they've researched, if they don't just happen to remember that in the moment, we don't want to trip them up with that. So we ask an open question. The next thing really that's important is that you listen, and you listen quite attentively to the answers that they give. And this is where I say, you know, allow the time for yourself, because it does take concentration, really. And on that listening, that you then look spontaneously as far as you possibly can, although you might want sometimes to have done a bit of preparation, that we follow up on what they've said in their answer to their tell me about, explain why question, their open question, and then maybe you pick up on some details. You might ask a what, a who, a when. You might pick up on some ideas, a why or how far. You might ask them to do some evaluation, talk about the importance or the implications of what they've said. Okay, but importantly, really, you shouldn't stick rigidly to questions that you've prepared in advance, because what we need for that AO1 is what we need is to have some interaction, really, with the candidates. So I think that is important to make sure that this is that, you know, in the general topic area discussions in Unit 1 and in the debate and the ongoing discussion in Unit 3, that there is, because this is A-level, this isn't a GCSE level qualification, that we have some genuine interaction. You also obviously need to pitch the questioning to show the ceiling of your candidate's performance. So we're looking to show the examiner how good they can be. Okay, so you will need to differentiate your questions. So for the weaker candidates, you might ask more and slightly simpler questions. For the more able candidates, they might have fewer and slightly more searching questions, but we're looking to find the top of their performance and for you to demonstrate that for the examiner. Okay, so the mark scheme for AO1, for example, for Unit 1, talks about a wealth of relevant ideas, opinions, demonstrating excellent knowledge and understanding of the general topic area. So we're really looking for that knowledge and understanding. And you see the open question might show the knowledge, but the details, the ideas, the the follow-up questions might show the understanding. So again, just think, am I showing knowledge and understanding? Is my question showing knowledge, but also understanding? Okay, so those things, we don't just want lots of fact-based questions, what and who and when. What we want is the why and how far, and for candidates to explain the importance and implications of the things that they're saying. Okay. Now, we're just going to talk to you now a little bit about the topic areas. We have AS topic areas and A2 topic areas, and you'll be familiar with these, I expect, from the specification. But again, it's worth a minute or so just to talk you through. So the international AS topic areas are youth matters, lifestyle, health and fitness, environment and travel, and education and employment. Okay, and those are for international AS. Okay, and so for the students who don't go beyond AS, those are the topics that they need to deal with. And those topics just relate to and they are called general topic areas. So they don't have to, but they can relate to the target language, culture, or community. It doesn't matter. So youth matters, lifestyle, all of those things are kind of global topics. They can relate and be exemplified with things from the French, Spanish, or German-speaking world, or indeed from wherever it is they are in the world themselves, whatever culture they happen to know. So there isn't a requirement for cultural specificity there. But when we get on to the international A2 topics, we're looking at technology in the target language speaking world, society in the target language speaking world, and ethics in the target language speaking world. Watch out in particular for that technology, because we're looking for examples which are specific to the French, Spanish, or German speaking world. So actually what we might be wanting to know is, you know, how many followers a particular leader or politician has on X, or the use of Instagram that a certain you know, celebrity makes from that target language culture, or what kind of installations for internet connectivity are kind of put in place in a target language country. So just make sure that as we're dealing with those A2 topics, that we are target language specific. And actually the society and ethics is a little less difficult to do than the technology. And again, we need to just make sure that those things are pulled very closely into using examples from the target language countries and communities. Right, so look, that was the sort of run through, that was the overview. We're going to have a look now at Unit 1 in depth and detail, and then we're going to have a look at Unit 3 in depth and detail. So for Unit 1, we begin by talking about the oral topic form. There is a speaking guide for Unit 1 that you'll be able to find on the website, so you don't have to remember everything I've said today, but you can find that guide and read through that guide and have this information refreshed. And you'll also have a recording available from the presentation today, which you could use even with your students if you want to. So just that will be available after the session today. So probably worth making sure you get a copy of that as well and save it. And the training content in any case will be available through the website. Anyway, look, we start with the OR1 form. This is the oral topic form. And this oral topic form is a form that you need to submit to Pearson. It's uploaded to the learner work transfer that tells us which exam, what your centre name is, centre number, general topic area 1 chosen by the candidate, and general topic area 2 chosen by the candidate, and then the stimulus card used. And that form is an electronic form that can be then uploaded and is there for the use of the examiner, but you don't get them back. The topics are allocated as you remember. The students will choose 2 topic areas. So you'll allocate a stimulus card for each candidate according to the sequence in the grid. So in advance of the examinations, candidates will have chosen and informed you of 2 of the 4 general topic areas on which they'd like to be tested. So remember, that's Youth Matters, which is YM there, Lifestyle, Health and Fitness, LHF, Environment and Travel, ET, and Education and Employment, EE. And to determine which stimulus card the candidate will get, you need to select the correct row for the candidate. So, for example, that 4th candidate on the day, refer to row 4 there, as you can see, the one that went with the red around it. Find the correct column for the combination of general topic areas chosen by the candidate. And that will give you the test. Okay, so a candidate who has chosen Youth Matters and Education and Employment, and they are 4th on your list, will get that speaking card. Okay, so you see how it works. Okay, hopefully that's clear. Okay, so those are the combinations. Okay. And yes, candidate chose Youth Matters and Education and Employment. They are candidate 4, so you look at row 4 and they will get card 2A. Okay. So again, that's something worth sort of, working out and kind of planning in advance. Okay. The grid, I think, runs up to 15. So if you do have a big centre, if you've got a lot of candidates, once you get to 15, you start with candidate number 1 again. But you just work through. Okay, you don't start again on each day. So if you're conducting for more than one day as well, I'm sorry, you start the new day at the beginning of the sequence again. Okay. So again, information is available in the teacher's guide. I'm not sure if I said that quite clearly. Let me say it again. So every day you start with candidate 1. But if on a particular day you have more than 15 candidates, and good luck with that, because that's a lot to do on a day, you would, if you had, 17 or something, you do the 15 and then you go back to the beginning of the grid again. Okay. Now, just let's have a look at the card. Okay, so this is your typical speaking card. This is the teacher examiner card. and the candidate has something similar, but we'll not we'll kind of look at that in a moment. But this is the card for you. The candidate, of course, will have prepared a card as well, and so they are have their 15 minutes. They have their text to read. So the mark scheme asks for AO2 for 4 marks, full and detailed answers to prescribed questions demonstrating excellent understanding of the stimulus and its wider implications. Okay, so on the card, there's a text that candidates study in the preparation time, and section A of the test is those 4 questions that you ask them, and you must ask them those questions verbatim. You don't change those questions. You just read out the questions. You're allowed to repeat the question up to twice if the candidate doesn't understand and they say, sorry, can you say that again? You can say it again. That's okay. Ask the questions in a fairly deliberate way, in a way that's very understandable, that candidates can follow. That's important. But you must just ask those 4 questions. So that's section A. And then in section B, you move on. You move away, but we can still talk about the general topic area, but we move away from the specific content of the card. And again, it's worth you just in your preparation time working out which candidate's going to have which card. And you might start to think a little bit about what it is they're going to be able to talk about as they move on and away. In terms of the sort of time management, really, for the test, it's a kind of a good idea to think about 4-2-4 for this test. So section A is the 4 set questions, and that lasts about 4 minutes. So again, as they practice, it's good for them to sort of think, actually, I've got about a minute to talk about each of those 4 questions. And then you're going to ask some further questions on the topic of the card. And you do that for about 2 more minutes. Excuse me. And then you need to move on to another subtopic. Okay, so another subtopic of the same topic. Okay, and you go on there for about 4 minutes. Okay, so just that 4-2-4 idea is kind of quite a good way to go. It's quite important as well, just to be mindful of the timings for the separate parts of the test, and so for candidates to have practiced speaking for that amount of time. So you know, we saw that topic about environment, and so you need to move on to another topic in the same topic area. So in the example we're going to sort of look at, the main focus is in solar power. So further questions then could maybe relate to pollution and recycling, and then after 2 minutes you should move on to another subtopic in the same topic area. So maybe we talk about energy pollution and recycling there, but in the same topic area, we could talk about travel, transport, and tourism, and we move on to another area. Okay. So if we sort of have a look at it in English, this is kind of the example, just because we've got various languages together. So we have a sort of example of what you saw just very briefly in Spanish on that card, but we're going to have a look in English. So we've got our little text, and the text they're always of about that same length. So what does the first paragraph tell us about solar energy in Spain? So for full marks, we're looking for at least 3 main points from the first paragraph. Okay, it's changed a lot over the years. The socialist government has built too many solar plants, so they've got surplus energy. Okay, so the candidate's going to summarize, they're going to explain that, but without reading it word for word from the card. And then we're going to ask you for, according to the text, what is the current situation with this energy source? And so that's the main idea of paragraph 2. So question 2 focuses on the main idea of paragraph 2. And then, in your opinion, can renewable energies meet all future demand? Why not? And in your opinion, what are the advantages of using renewable energies? So those are wider opinions on the topic. Okay, so if we have a sort of think about what the candidate might say, what does the first paragraph tell us about solar energy in Spain? In the first paragraph, we learn that there have been lots of changes of policy in Spain with the approach to solar power. There was overproduction as a result of the approach of earlier governments, and too many power plants were built, especially given the economic problems Spain was facing. Okay, so we've added in a little bit of information as well there. So we've expanded on that, showing some knowledge and understanding, but it doesn't have to be focused on Spain specifically, but we are responding to that. According to experts, what's the current situation? Experts think that there will be enough solar power capacity for the next 10 years. Means have also been devised to store power for use overnight when there's no sunlight. They also point out that costs of installation have decreased by 1/10 each year. Okay. So that's your sort of section A, your first 2 questions. And then we've got the opinion questions, which are the wider opinions about the topic areas. In your opinion, can renewable energies meet all future demand? So here we're asked for your opinion. So they're asked in your opinion, so they need to give their opinion. I think they can meet all demands, but can expand massively. As the text mentions, let's talk about what the text says, because we're wanting to refer to the text. As the text mentions, they can be costly to install, and there's an issue with the continuity of supply. For example, more power is needed in colder and darker winter months. I also see a problem with the technology in certain sectors, such as aviation. Okay, so we could add in some information that goes beyond what the text tells it, focus on the text, but it goes beyond it. And that's what we're looking for students to do, candidates to do. In your opinion, what are the advantages of using renewable energies? I think the most important advantage of renewables is environmental, because they tend to be cleaner. The text also says that costs are falling, so this is an important advantage for customers, and also good for industry as energy prices affect the cost of goods. So we've gone wider. Okay. The typo there, it should be is instead of in, but I'll correct that for next time. And then section B, okay, so we've kind of done the bit that relates to the card. Section B is about where next. Now, remember that we're in that general topic area of environment and travel. So energy, pollution, and recycling, those have kind of been used up. Okay, the energy, pollution, and recycling. The card itself was about energy. And then we've expanded on, we could talk about pollution and recycling. So those are the other bits of that topic. And then maybe we go on to talk about tourism, travel, and transport. So you decide where it is you're going to go next. So again, have a look at the, if the, have a look at the topic on the card, and where do we go next with it? So, do you think recycling is important? We can have a starter question there, and that starts to move them away from the topic of energy, which we've used up, onto something else within that topic, particular topic. Obviously, if your topic was tourism, travel, and transport, you might, the information on the card might be about tourism, and then you could move on to talking about transport. And then with sort of natural disasters and weather, climate change and its impact, you just look at the information on the card and think, I'm going to just move it away in the first part of the follow-up, and then away completely. And then you say, now let's move on and speak about travel and transport. Do you think public transport is important? And you've got that open starter question, okay? So section B is all about the moving on. So what do we get the marks for? Okay, well, we get the marks for quality of language, that's accuracy. So that's AO3. There are 5 marks available for that. And also for quality of language, which is range of lexis. So remember that vocabulary is important. Vocabulary range is important. So we get the marks for that. For AO1, we're getting the marks for spontaneity and development. And so keep in mind that idea of spontaneity. If what they say is too formulaic, we have a problem, don't we? We have a problem because the spontaneity could be missing. So we know that students are going to talk about things that they've prepared. This is a taught course. We're not expecting them to completely think on their feet and come up with new original ideas during the test. But nevertheless, the spontaneity needs to be evidently there so that they are not reciting pre-learned information that maybe they don't understand so well. And then they're getting marks for understanding, which is stimulus specific, so AO2. There are 4 marks available for that. So that's their response to the information on the card. That's those first 2 questions about, what the card says. So it's really important to try and focus on those marks. And actually those marks can be picked up right the way through those 4 questions. It's in the candidate says it's interesting what it says on the card about, because I think, okay. And then we're also giving 10 marks for their knowledge and understanding of the general topic area. So that's for assessment objective 1, okay? And so that knowledge and understanding is also important. It's not just what do you know, but it's also why it matters, why those things are important. Now, we're going to give you a few minutes now to, and you'll be pleased to know, I'm going to stop talking for a little while. We're going to get you to have a listen to a Unit 1 speaking test. Now, in the chat, I think we put the link to those tests, but I'm going to drop it into the chat again in case you didn't manage to pick it up last time. So that should take you to a WeTransfer link, which we hope will work for you. Again, my apologies if there are any glitches and your school system doesn't allow it or whatever. This can sometimes happen. If not, I'm afraid you'll need to grab those from the website after the event today. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go quiet now for about 10 minutes. So it's 9:55 at the moment, and so until 10:05, and I'm going to give you that opportunity to listen. You don't necessarily need to listen all the way through. So as you just listen, can you just make a note? Were the 4 questions asked from the card, as far as you can see? Was the topic on the card developed further? Did the examiner move on to a different topic? And were the questions facilitating and open in nature? Okay, so I'm going to go quiet now, and I'll see you back at 11:05. Right. Now we'll come back together, and hopefully you've had an opportunity to have a listen to those. I did notice there was somebody in the chat said that the link didn't work for them, and that may be because if you're using a school system, it's just not quite liking it. It could be something that's blocked. So if that's the case, if you copy the link and email it to yourself, you would be able to probably download those things onto a personal computer after the event. But as I say, those exemplars are also available on the website. So apologies if there is anybody who didn't manage to get it. It's always a little bit tricky with these things. Sometimes school systems will kind of block downloads and so on. But hopefully other people have been able to have a listen. Now we're going to move on. We're going to just, because I sort of said we'll do a few little sort of kind of lesson activity things. So this is kind of how we might do some things to add some value. So things that we can get students to practice doing is practice using their own words. So things like, just a very simple thing, because we're looking for that variety of lexis, if you remember. Changing word problem to challenge, and then thinking about the antonym solution and also different parts of speech. So again, just do a little bit of work with vocabulary, particularly for some of those overused words. We change problem to challenge. We maybe talk about the solution, problem and solution, and we might use a different part of speech. So any of those things that give students some practice in saying things in a different way, So if the word in the text, and of course, keep in mind that we're looking for them to talk about the things that are in the text as well. So, you know what the general topic areas are for AS, and you therefore have a good idea of what the general words are likely to be. But actually, how can we train our students to say to paraphrase those things, to use those to use that information to use to express things in their own words. So, for government, they might want to have politicians, world leaders, the people in charge, ministers, so those sorts of things. For fashion, we might say what people wear, popular brands, dressing to impress. Volunteering, we might talk about charity work, helping those less fortunate, making donations, etc. So some useful things to be doing with students about kind of the same sense using different words. And this is kind of the skill that we would like them to be developing. So, education is very important for our society because skilled workers allow the economy to grow, and this enables the country to compete effectively abroad. Okay, in different words. Good schools are essential because well-educated workers make the country make more money, and this means we can sell our goods and services internationally. So we've given the same idea, but we've used some different words. So that practice in paraphrasing, in taking the ideas and manipulating them a little bit to kind of give the same messages is something we can usefully work on with our students. And in section B, leading the discussion with a teacher examiner who's listening. Okay, so, really important. I mentioned about listening, and this is not the only issue, so what else? And there are lots of examples I can think of. Tell me more. So what we can get our students to do is to feed you the things that they would like to talk about a little bit more. So this is good practice. So they answer their question and they say, oh, and this isn't the only issue. And you are listening as the teacher examines. Oh, so what else? What are the other issues? And there are lots of other examples I can think of. Oh, tell me more about that. Okay. So that is good practice, and that is something that students can usefully do to lead the discussion and promote spontaneity. We might also get them to sort of frame their thinking as well. So think about the positives, the negatives, and something that's interesting. That's a kind of de Bono type thinking activity: positive, negative, interesting. We might ask students as well to think about the language that they use. So, subordinate clauses used to extend analysis. So lots of things, although, and there is, and however, not everyone agrees that, because, okay. So the more we can encourage that use of subordinate clauses, different clause types, we're varying the range of language there, but we're also extending the ideas. And again, these things seem quite obvious to us maybe, but to students, they're not always so obvious. And then a third thing really with section B is using the mark scheme words and sort of weaving those words from the mark schemes into the things that students say. So for example, the mark scheme says, wealth of relevant ideas and opinions demonstrating excellent knowledge and understanding of the topic areas. So a student who says, this is relevant because, is using a word from the mark scheme, and that if they use the word from the mark scheme and they say this is relevant, they then have to say something that's relevant. Opinions, my personal opinion is, as I understand it. So, opinions, understanding what I know. So using some of those words from the mark schemes is a really useful way to get them to frame their thinking. Okay, good. Now we're going to move on now, and we're going to have a look at the Unit 3 test. So we've kind of looked at Unit 1. We're going to look at conducting the Unit 3 test and do very much the same kind of thing that we did with Unit 1. And then when we get to the end, I'll pick up on any questions that you might have. So just sort of beginning with the overview then of the Unit 3 test. Students are expected to develop their presentation skills in the target language by presenting and defending their own views on their chosen issue while sustaining debate. So it's important that they have the language that's necessary to sustain a debate, to argue their stance, their point of view. And students can choose any issue, and they're not restricted to any of the prescribed general topic areas in any of the other units. So it can be anything, but it needs to be an issue where there's an element of contention, really, in order for that debate to be effective. There need to be different points of view about it. So it's an area of contention, not something that's primarily descriptive. And so as you guide them, that's probably a useful thing to be saying to them. Students develop their debating skills then by defending their views and sustaining discussions. And just in terms of the sort of language that's required, there's a grammar list provided in Appendix 6 of the specification, and that kind of is a good guide to the sort of level of language, a level of complexity of language that we would be looking for at this point in the test. And remember, it steps up a bit from AS because we're moving into an A2 test now. The assessment lasts 11 to 13 minutes. It's out of 40 marks, and it's all marked holistically, although some marks are allocated specifically to the debate. So we'll have a look at that in a moment as well in terms of the technical requirements. Now, there's a form OR3 that should also, if you've been able to download the materials, be in the download pack that we gave you. But again, it's on the website, it's available for you. And students need to complete an oral chosen issue form. This is the OR3, and that's Appendix 7 of the spec, and it's in the oral assessment forms area. And they need to do that no more than 3 weeks in advance of the assessment. So at least 3 weeks before, they need to write a brief statement in the target language indicating their stance on the chosen issue. And a copy of this form needs to be submitted to the teacher examiner before the assessment. If you are, for any reason, conducting tests with candidates who are external to your centre as well, just make sure that they've provided you that within at least 3 weeks before the exam, because of course you need to do a bit of preparation on this as well, because the topic area, although you don't need specific knowledge, you may need to do a little bit of research. And occasionally, these there are linguistic areas of research that you need to do as as a teacher. I remember doing one of these tests where a candidate talked about the life cycle of axolotls, and I needed to, in Spanish, I needed to do a bit of work to find the vocabulary that I needed to sort of why they were endangered. So and government policy. So I needed to find needed to do a bit of looking up of vocabulary just to make sure that I was prepared as well. Students can take a copy of this form into the exam room and they can refer to it at any point during the test. So they don't have to memorize it, but it is something that needs to come to you. It's an electronically completed form now, and it needs to be sent with the recording over to Pearson. So it looks like that. Okay. It's very simple. They just, I am in support of, I disagree with. And they do that in the target language, in French, Spanish, or German. And again, that form isn't returned to centres, although it's electronic, so you'll probably have a copy of it anyway. The bit underneath is very much for the examiner's use, and it's where they check that everything is as it should be. But again, that's sort of useful for you to look at, because those are things that examiners are looking for. And this is the same with the OR1 form. Is the timing too long or too short? Is the chosen issue outlined or not outlined? Do they explain their issue? Were opinions defended or justified? Is the spontaneous discussion, are unpredictable areas of discussion explored? And all of those things. So just that bit of additional information is something that examiners are ticking to say what's right or wrong with the test, and whether the test is conducted correctly or incorrectly. And so those are useful guidance for you as a teacher as well, just to make sure that we are definitely showing that the candidates can do those things. Okay. So let's have a look at the test itself. So we've got two sections, section A and section B. So in section A, students choose a topic on which they take a stance. Okay. They have free choice of the topic and they're expected to research it. So the topic isn't just and the specificity of the topic is important. And I think it's, they're taking a stance on something that not everybody has necessarily thought about. So it isn't just about, I think recycling is a good thing. Okay, so what we're asking them to do is to have something where they have evidenced some research. And they need to refer to where they found information in the target language sources. So we're looking for them to say, I read an article about, I watched a documentary on, so on and so forth, so that we have reference in what they say to where they found the information. Okay, and that's very important. And students might choose to spend approximately 1 minute to outline their stance on their chosen issue, followed by approximately 4 minutes debate on the issue. Now, they don't have to outline their issue, but I don't know why you wouldn't, because that minute that they can prepare in advance, and your first question can be, tell me about your issue, and they tell you about their issue and you listen, and within that they have outlined the main stance, they've outlined some of their opinion, they've justified that opinion, and then you pick it up from there. And at least 2 sources must be mentioned to have access to the higher marks. Okay, so within that presentation and discussion, they need to refer to at least 2 things that they've read, ideally in the target language, and they need to have been read in the target language as well. And so it's quite a good opportunity really to mention those in that 1 minute, and at least you kind of, I won't say ticked that box, but you've definitely demonstrated that there, and you could go on to do more about it. So in section B, then the teacher examiner introduces at least 2 further issues for discussion. The students mustn't know in advance of the assessment which further issues the teacher examiner will choose for discussion, and these must be unpredictable elements of the assessment. Okay. Now, where you choose to talk about topics that relate to the international A-level topics. That's the technology, society, and ethics. So those are the A2 topics. The students must refer to the countries or communities where the language is spoken. Okay. If you've chosen to talk about the general topic areas, then they don't need to. So again, important that you are pushing that if you're an examiner. If they talk about technology but you say, oh, but what about in Germany, or what about in Spain, or what about in France, so that we are insisting that they do that. And if they don't do it, they should know that they have to do it. But if they don't do it, please, in terms of that idea of facilitating examiner, push them in that direction and very, very solidly push them in that direction, just to make sure that we've got that coverage. And students have 6 to 8 minutes of discussion time. So let's have a look at the 2 sections in a bit more detail then. The debate. So teacher examiners should prepare by thinking of possible counter arguments to the candidate's chosen stance, but you won't necessarily know what they've researched, so they need to be quite general counter arguments. You should ask the candidate to outline their stance and their chosen issue. On their chosen issue, you need to stop the candidates as well if they speak for more than a minute about their issue. So good practice is that they get ready and that they prepared themselves, and the majority of candidates will have prepared to speak for a minute, and they will have that kind of memorized, and that's absolutely fine, and that gets them going. But if it goes over a minute, you need to stop them. As they speak as well, try to make some notes in order to formulate your questions. And it's what you can say to the students, I'm making some notes. It's not, I'm just to help me with my questions. So because I'm listening to what you say. And then you need to challenge the candidate's stance using counter arguments for about 4 minutes. But what's important is that you don't try to win the debate. Okay, so we're trying to help them through. So it is you have to challenge their response, but not be adversarial with them. So it's not about who wins the debate. You're offering facilitative challenge just to help them through and help them defend. So they're a question, yeah, but isn't something, or don't you think, or what would you say to somebody who argued that? Okay, and it's that sort of thing that you need to get from candidates. Also, if they haven't talked about the sources of their information, where did you find this information from? We want to know that they have found that information from reading and from research. Now, just talking a little bit about kind of the challenges then in this debate, how you challenge them. So what's a fair challenge based upon? So a fair challenge can be based on something the candidate has already said to you. You say to them, you mentioned such and such, but it seems to me that it would be better if. Okay, so it's based on something they've already said to you. It could be based on a generally held and familiar counter argument. What you say is interesting, but don't most people think that? Okay, so those are the kinds of challenges that we might ask you to do. And I think we're not asking you to challenge them on points of fact, either on statistics, on data, or that kind of thing. Okay, so be careful that your challenges are fair. And an unfair challenge is, where a teacher examiner introduces detailed superior knowledge, but surely you know that the events of 1868 do not support your stance. Well, obviously maybe they don't, because we don't know what it is they've researched, what it is they've found out. Or please avoid as well anything likely to be outside the experience of their learner. Remember, that they're 18-year-old students for the majority. In the majority of cases, and so not everything is going to be within their likely life experience. Okay, so moving on now to section B and the further issues. 2 further issues need to be discussed. They can be from the IAS or the IA2 topic areas. As I mentioned, if they're from the IA2 topic areas, they need to be rooted in the target language, culture, or communities. And each issue should ideally be discussed for about 4 minutes. And this part of the test isn't a debate. And so candidates can just be asked to show you what they know and what they understand. Okay, so we don't need to chat. We've stopped challenging them in section B. You need to refer to the earlier slides as well about facilitative examining. That's important, about kind of the kinds of questions, the open questions, all of the listening. That is really important as well. And as I mentioned, begin each issue with open question. Tell me about the importance of technology in the French, Spanish, German speaking world. And then you listen and you dig deeper. As you deal with this part of the test as well, just try to avoid any sort of overlap with the content of the debate and the likely content of the debate. And that's not just about sort of the content of the things they say, but also kind of the linguistic content. So if in their debate they've used lots of past time frames and that sort of thing, you might want to encourage them to do some future time frame a little bit in your ongoing discussion, just to make sure that we've covered off that sort of range of language. So the time management then sort of schematically looks kind of like this, really. So section A, the student sets out their stance if they choose to do so. So it's about a minute, and it's if they choose to do so. They don't have to, but I don't know why they wouldn't. It's good practice if they do, and it's reassuring for them if they do. And then also in section A, the teacher examiner debates the stance, and that takes about 4 minutes. So we've got about 5 minutes of the presenting the stance and debating the stance. And then section B, you talk about 2 further issues, about 4 minutes per issue, and that gives you about 8 minutes in total. Okay. So maybe we talk about, I think, so their stances, I think young people should be able to vote at the age of 15. Okay, they explain why. It doesn't have to be related to the target language, cultural community, it can just be their view, but they've taken that stance. So that might sit there, for example. And then in the follow-up discussion, we might talk about travel and tourism, travel and transport, and the problem of poverty in rural Spain, France, Germany. Now, remember that we talk about 2 issues. We're going to tell them what the issues are. If we're talking about a general topic area, we don't need to locate it in the target language, cultural community. But if we talk about one of those international A-level, the A2 topics, they definitely do need to be located there. And actually sometimes one of each is not a bad thing to do, but you will know your students, and obviously they're marked against the same criteria, they're marked against the same mark scheme, but just make sure that what we've got is a sort of a nice range of information across the test. And you can see, can't you, that the voting at the age of 15 is completely unrelated to travel and tourism, and that's also completely unrelated to problem of poverty in rural France, Spain, Germany, etc. Okay. So if we just have a look now and we have a think about what the marks are given for, the marks are given for quality of language accuracy. So there are 5 marks for accuracy. Quality of language, that's range of lexis, so 5 marks for the range of vocabulary. So there we go, 10 marks for language, if you like. And then we've got those 20 marks for spontaneity and development. Okay, so again, we're looking for there to be some spontaneity. The presentation of their stance doesn't need to be spontaneous, they can prepare that, but the rest needs to be spontaneous. They need to be using your questions as a sort of springboard to answer the wider implications of the question, and so on. There are 5 marks for reading and research. So that's for the debate only. Okay, but again, important that we've referenced the sources, not just named them. We might say, and the author and what this person says is interesting because because they argue something. So really try to encourage them to do those things. And if in the presentation part of the presentation of the standards, they haven't referred to those two sources, try to encourage them, at least two sources, try to encourage them to do that. And sometimes I find as an examiner, it's worth just sort of having a tick on a sheet yourself when you hear it. Because you don't need to ask them if they've already done it, but if they haven't done it, you do need to try and remember to ask them to do that, just to give them that access to those 5 marks. It's really for teacher examiners to be on top of the technical requirements of the test. You might tell the students lots and lots of times, but in the moment, we don't want them to have to remember too many technical things that they need to do, and so it's just worth kind of watching out. And that AO2 is one that can slip, and it can slip on Unit 1 as well. And then for AO4, we've got that critical analysis. There are 5 marks available for that. Now we're going to do the same thing now that we did with the Unit 1 test. I'm going to give you a little bit of time now to listen to a Unit 3 speaking test. I'm going to give you sort of 10 minutes, so you may not be able to listen to quite all of it, but I have a few more things I want to say in terms of teaching and learning ideas, and I want to allow a little bit of time for some questions at the end. So you can listen to a bit and fast forward if you'd like to, and save them and download them so that you have them for future use. But just we want to notice: was there a debate? Was there challenge? Were 2 further issues dealt with? Did the examiner move on and observe the timings? If you notice that's useful, looking at the transitions. And also, were the questions facilitating and open in nature? So was it reflective of the things that we've talked about? So look, it's 10:32 now. I'm going to actually let's come back at 10:45. And we can then pick up. It gives you 13 minutes. You might just manage to listen to a whole test there, and then we'll say a few more things, and I'll give you some time to answer, and we can pick up on any questions. So we'll see you back at 10:45, everybody. Thank you. Okay, so hopefully you've had an opportunity to have a listen there as well, and notice as well in the materials to download, we included the commentaries from the principal examiner as well, so it was a kind of a useful source of information and ideas. So we're going to do a bit the same thing we did with the unit 1 now. We're going to just have a kind of the sort of thing that you might do for adding value to the debate section. So I think we all kind of used de Bono's thinking hats a long time ago. And it kind of came into fashion and went out, but actually it's a really good little tool for helping to sort of frame a debate with you know, so the kind of the grey hat is all about gathering the data and understanding the issue or problem to solve. The red hat is all about the hunches, the intuition, the judgment. Creativity is green, positivity is the sort of yellow, being optimistic, and then analysis is the sort of blue hat. It's about used to manage the process and make sure that each hat's used correctly, and you know, the black hat is about the judgment. And so, you know, just thinking about how you might formulate some questions, you know, the grey, do the statistics support your argument? Or the red, don't people feel threatened by this issue? Or the green, you know, what solutions exist? And the yellow, but surely there are lots of benefits too, you know. So blue, how do you know that such and such a thing is correct? And black, you know, but that really isn't possible in the real world, is it? And so we can kind of use those things and play around with those kinds of questioning ideas with our students. And then adding value in section B, then sort of thinking a bit about the kind of further issues. So maybe we're talking about lifestyle, health and fitness, and you can ask a sort of open question, you know, tell me what you think makes for a healthy lifestyle. And then again, coming back to those varied interrogatives, varying those interrogatives are a useful thing to do, just to make sure that we kind of cover a range of information of different kinds of response, that we're getting ideas, that we're getting facts, that we're getting justification, that we're getting explanation. And we also need to be looking at past, present, and future. And I know past, present, future seems very GCSE by comparison with A-level, but you know, we are looking to reward those things, and we're looking to make sure that that range of language is kind of dealt with. So, you know, we start off with that open, what makes a healthy lifestyle, but we could start exploring it. You know, why do some people not look after their health? And when do you think health problems start, and how can people become healthier, and where do you think people have the best diet, and who is responsible for the well-being of the elderly, and what advice would you give to the government about health? And so again, working with those interrogatives, getting students to think in terms of those interrogatives. They could even develop a set of questions on each topic using those interrogatives that would vary that discussion, and kind of that modeling for students is also really important. Okay, so that's sort of as much as I want to say about the conduct of the test, about the format of the test, and we're going to bring you on to some of the exciting bit that everybody likes now, which is about administration. So I'm going to say a few things about administration, and then we will have a few minutes for questions at the end. So remember that we have that candidate authentication form that's required. So again, you need to get the appropriate signatures, and that needs to be uploaded. Administrative support is available on the website there. So you look at forms and administration, make sure you're familiar with that. We've talked about the uploading of materials. It says there's a thing that says new submissions, but it's new from 2022, so new in the sense of old now, but that tells you how you upload, label and upload materials to the learner work transfer, which is the Pearson platform. Say a few things a little bit about support as well. You know, we're hoping we'll support you at every stage. Just make sure that you're familiar with the website, and things get added all the time. So we've got their specification. We've got past papers. If you're new to Pearson, those little padlock symbols along the side of the past papers, your exams officer can provide you with an electronic key to unlock those. They just stop students downloading the papers and kind of cheating if you want to do a mock exam, really. We've got a range of learning and teaching materials, and also remember to look at the UK, the national A-level for England as well. That has very similar content, and so there will be resources there that you could use. And then we also have our training content, which is uploaded. And I think the training content for the event today will eventually appear there. We'll remind you about Results Plus. So Results Plus enables you to analyze your students' responses. So, you know, the student takes the exam paper, they're scanned, they're marked, and then we have a very sort of data-rich system. And now everything's marked online. All of the data is gathered, and you can have access to that as a teacher to see where your students did well and did badly, and particularly for the speaking, which assessment objectives they were doing well on, and are there any weaknesses in there that maybe could be addressed by you as a teacher for future candidates in future series. We don't always have Exam Wizard for every subject, but if you're interested, Exam Wizard in a lot of subjects will enable you to pull together exam papers, and that's a free resource to use. And so have a little investigate into Exam Wizard. I mentioned to you access to scripts, so you're able to get PDFs of your candidates' marked scripts. So again, for individual candidates, you can see how well they did, and you can use that alongside Results Plus. There are some paid-for resources as well. So there are resource packs for teachers available, and those are available if you have a look at www.pearson.com/international-schools. You'll be able to find those teacher resource packs available to support you with the delivery of the specification. Finally, I suppose to mention our subject advisor, who is Rebecca Waker. Any kind of queries, questions that you might have, you can contact Rebecca at teachinglanguages@pearson.com. If you'd like to talk to somebody, there's a phone number there, which is +44 for the UK, of course. And the lines are open 9 till 5 London time, UK time. And you can also sign up for some regular updates. So any kind of queries, anything that you need in particular in terms of sort of further support or anything you kind of need to know, you can direct your query through those subject advisors. So Rebecca and or one of her team will be able to get back to you with responses there. And I'm kind of getting to the point where we're going to pick up on any kind of questions that people might have. So forgive me if I missed a question that appeared in the chat earlier on. I'm just have a little scroll back and see if I can pick up and answer anything that was asked. Okay, so we had a question about a query about the link, but maybe we've kind of done it. Unfortunately, I think yes, that's probably due to do with not being able to deal with it. But yeah, okay, so we have to say connection issues we can't deal with. Okay. Let's have a look through. Okay. So we had a question about, so what if the topic of the stimulus is about health issues? What would we move on to? Well, you move on really to something within that topic area, but you're asking questions which moves away from the content of the card. The important bit is that you move away from the content of the card. So, you know, in the event that the card talks about kind of healthy living and healthy eating, you might want to talk about the importance of exercise and so on. So we're thematically we're moving away. Okay, so Julie's asking about which you should we use in the debate. Really, whatever you're comfortable with, and there's no particular concern about whether it's formal or informal address. Whatever your candidates will use most comfortably and you're most comfortable with, and whatever you've practiced. I think in some ways it's more important to be consistent than to worry about that. But please don't worry about that. That's absolutely. Question about whether we're going to receive the recording. Yes, the recording will be available to you, and I think it comes sometime tomorrow. And I have a feeling you access it through the same link, but maybe Hansel will be able to pick up on that at the end of where you get the recording from. It should also appear on the website in past training content. Can students use the vocabulary in the text to answer questions, or do they need to manipulate the vocabulary? Yes, they can use the vocabulary, they can use information in the text, but they need to do it in such a way that they're not reading out loud from the text, because what we're looking for is, have they understood what's in the text? So yes, odd words and phrases and that sort of thing is absolutely fine for them to reuse. We're not expecting them to do huge amounts of manipulation, but those tasks that I showed you, those exercises that I showed you about kind of saying the same thing in a different way, are useful things to practice with them for the student, just to kind of try and get them able to do those things. Okay, good. Well, that kind of came to the end of everything that appeared in the chat. I'm going to sort of say a thank you now to everybody for your time today. I hope you found it a useful addition to your knowledge. Obviously, we will be happy to pick up and answer any questions. Rebecca, your subject advisor, will be happy to do that as well. But we hope you found it a useful use of a couple of hours today. And thank you very much for your time.